Hello and welcome to Jump To It for IrishRacing.com and Betting Expert. I'm Shane Anderson. On today's show, we'll be talking more about glorious Goodwood and the Galway Festival. Also touch on the Racing League, which launches today in the UK with the first meeting of the 6-week series at Newcastle. And of course, we'll also be talking about the strange situation that occurred in Ireland this week with trainer Jessica Harrington settling up the wrong horse, which came out and won and was subsequently disqualified. Joining me to discuss all of that and also find plenty of winners, Stephen Harris and Ed Quigley join me. Stephen, I'll start with you. Glorious Goodwood, we're a couple of days down at the time of filming. It certainly has been an action-packed week of racing, with the track on day one starting out in the heavy range, and at this stage we're now into about the good range.
Yeah, it's been a strange week. So there's been really some cracking racing. We had Holly Doyle riding a treble on Tuesday. Yesterday we had Alcohol Free winning for Andrew Balding, the Sussex Stakes. That was a brilliant race. It has been odd. I mean, one of the things I'm sure we're going to touch on is back on Thursday last week, Goodwood was still watering, which is quite extraordinary. And the ground started off on the heavy side, which is pretty unsatisfactory. As it happens, we've had torrential rain. It's now dried out really quickly. So it's been a lot of different things. I think on Thursday we're going to get nearly good ground, but the forecast is diabolical again. So it's not been easy for punters.
Certainly hasn't, and we will talk more about the track situation at Goodwood as Ed Quigley joins us. Ed, good to catch up once again. I wanted to start on a couple of news points that have come through over the last 2 days or so. Oxted, one of the star sprinters in the UK, a winner of the King's Stand Stakes at Royal Ascot, has sadly got a knee injury and will be out for some period of time. And also the wonderful mare Honeysuckle, the unbeaten star of the jumps racing season. Well, she's going to have one more season over hurdles before she steps over the bigger fences in chasing. What do you make of that?
Yeah, interesting. In regards to Honeysuckle, I mean, Henry de Bromhead kind of said tongue-in-cheek, didn't he? He said, I'm going to have a chat with the owners, Mr. Alexander, with a couple of bottles of Merlot and let's thrash it out. I think Henry de Bromhead has had his way at the end of the day. They're going to stick to hurdles for at least one more season. To be honest with you, I'd be sceptical if they ever did go chasing. I think it's something the owner would almost half like to do, if you see what I'm saying, and try and do a bit of a dawn run. But yeah, look, Honeysuckle, fantastic individual. Will take all the beating again in 2-mile division next season over hurdles. And then, yeah, in regards to Oxted, of course, we flagged up on last week's show. I touched upon the fact how the horse hung across the track in the July Cup, something he'd never done before. Anyway, he was sent away for a full MOT and scan. They found basically a chick bone. His knee's injured, and he's going to require the rest of the season off. So yeah, Oxted on the sidelines, but we'll add they intend to totally bring him back again next season and have another go with him. And yeah, Honeysuckle all routes the champion hurdle in March.
All right, guys, let's talk about the Racing League, which has certainly had a lot of discussion over social media in the past couple of weeks. It launches today in the UK, and basically it is a 6-week series launching tonight at Newcastle on the Tipster course. It'll be run across 4 race courses. It consists of teams of 12 teams in total, which will be competing for points series in each race with an overall prize pool of £50,000 per race. So, Stephen, we're seeing a significant investment in prize money going to the races, but it only seems to be now available for a select few that are a part of the team structure. Let's start with the first point around the Racing League. Do you think racing needs a team-structured event series?
Well, I was brought up, Shane, if you haven't got anything nice to say, don't say it. But unfortunately, I'm going to have to go against that. I mean, the positive is prize money, something new, and there is very good prize money, so that is a positive thing. But everything else about it doesn't work. And from a punting point of view, you can tell it's been dreamt up by people who aren't punters. Punters aren't interested in mythical teams that were created last week. Nobody's cheering on Ireland, in inverted commas, because someone's been lobbed $5,000 to promote them. I mean, it's absolute nonsense. I mean, the prize money's welcome. The other thing you touched on is the eliteness of it all. Now, apparently every trainer was written to. That was what the Racing League have said. But if you look around at some smaller or medium-sized trainers, they're sort of denying any contacts ever been made. A lot of smaller trainers will not have the 5 horses that were originally required in that ratings band to take part. That's now been scrapped to let Jamie Osborne enter 3. I mean, basically, it's a complete shambles that, in my opinion, will attract very little punter interest at all. And that's just the start of it. I mean, I think, I'm being quite kind there. I think it's a really poor idea.
Ed, do you agree? Do you see any positivity around the Racing League?
Well, look, yeah, in regards to what Stephen says, the price, man, you can't be sniffed at. Was it 1.8 million being pumped into it? Fair enough. That is no issue with that at all. The technicalities of the ratings bands. I mean, Grant Chewer's come out and said some very eloquent words about the situation, and some trainers have said claiming they've never been contacted. Who has and hasn't, and what's happened there behind the scenes, I'm not privy to that information. In regards to the concept itself, now it is an interesting one because I generally do admire anyone trying to come up with something creative and something fresh and something different, because I always think there's too much racing going on. So at least if you're going to have too much racing on, let's have it with a twist and a bit of a jovial kind of attitude. But racing generally, sports are often split up into team events or individual events, and racing sells itself by and large as an individual sport. You get punters who follow the individual horse. I always back that horse, or I always back Frankie Dettori when he's riding, or I always follow Roger Varian. Yeah, it's sold on its individualism. Then you get sports which are tribal, for want of a better phrase, like football or club rugby, where you have an affinity with your team or club, forged into the kind of the woodwork, woven into the fabric through years, throughout communities or whatever. So now you've suddenly got a load of, on the face of it, random individuals cobbled into a load of kind of newfangled pseudo team ethics culture, and we're supposed to really buy into it. Now, look, I may get it totally wrong, and in time it does work, but I'm just very sceptical. I cannot imagine there's a commuter sat on the district line heading westbound suddenly. Oh no, there's an injury to Team Swish tonight. Oh, who's going to run in that 0 to 90? Absolute meltdown. End up missing their tube stop. Or I can't imagine the merchandise selling out. You never know. I mean, Stephen might be repping his eToro Racing polo shirt around the countryside outside Surrey. You never know. But it's trying to create, in my kind of view, like this pseudo fake rapport as a team culture, which really I don't see how anyone's going to buy into it. It may succeed for the reasons it's not actually intending to, in the fact that I actually think the racing itself will be pretty good and will be worth watching. It's just the concept side of things. As I said, I admire the originality and Ollie Harris and the creativity, trying to do something new and different. I've got no issue with that at all. Just whether it could be channeled in a slightly different manner and altered. Maybe there will be kind of teething problems and it will develop as it goes along. I mean, one thing I thought about perhaps harping back to the individual point is whether they brought in a cutthroat kind of relegation system for the jockeys or trainers and got the public to vote. So say the bottom two jockeys, performing jockeys, the 6 jockeys that can replace them, the public get to vote who are the 2 that are going to replace them. Suddenly there's a bit of interest there. Jockey X has got to go up to Newcastle and finish at least in the top 2 or they're thrown out. A bit like retaining your PJ Tour card or getting relegated out of the championship or something. So otherwise it just becomes another meeting just with these funny gimmicks and different shirts, different colours. So I want to be positive about it. I admire the chance to try and do something different. I'm just ultimately not sure the concept as it's intended to will ultimately work.
I think a couple of points that need to be factored in on this. First of all is the use of the term innovation. Everyone's saying this is a wonderful innovation for racing. The reality is it's not true innovation. It's a shift in a programming culture. I think the other angle too is, you've already got massive racing stables like Godolphin, you've got Coolmore through Ballydoyle and a few others. You don't really see fans going out there just cheering on the Godolphin runners just because they like the Godolphin runners. Is there a team concept in that space that potentially could have been invigorated? But I think the core of what they need to do is think about how are they going to get new people into following the sport of racing, into betting the sport of racing. I'm not 100% convinced that this is the model. But I think, Ed, you touched on a really good point. If you're going to look at ways of trying to get the public involved, there are aspects of public involvement. In Japan, there are 2 races that at Group 1 level that are determined by public vote. Australia's gone down a similar route with an all-star mile where people actually vote in to make up the final field selection based on the popularity of horses going into that race. That to me is an angle of innovation that perhaps could be looked at more so than trying to create a quasi style of team parochialism that perhaps just doesn't exist. Guys, do you agree?
Well, yeah, I think that is a very, very good point. My main bugbear about this is there's far, far too much racing as it is. You can see at Goodwood this week. It's a 5-day meeting these days. half of it is low-grade garbage with small fields. To be absolutely honest, I mean, I've enjoyed the week. There's some cracking group races and one or two very good handicaps. But at 5:50 in the afternoon, there's a six-runner Fillies handicap. The card on Saturday is absolutely disgraceful, bar the big race. I mean, to be honest, it wouldn't be out of place at Brighton. I mean, this racing league has been chiselled in on the evening on a Thursday. Okay, you've got Epsom on, you've got Galway on. Let's just pump. If we're going to have some new investment in the sport, let's get it targeted at the racing we've got and make it more competitive and have less of it, to be quite honest. Have 2 meetings in the afternoon and 2 in the evening. Make sure there's a minimum of 8 runners in any race, otherwise you scrap it. Make sure there's a minimum prize money level of £5,000 to the winner. Otherwise, it's just becoming a race to the bottom. And this sort of sideshow, all it's probably done is take away runners who'd be running at Goodwood and Epsom, to be quite honest. That's the actual truth. So you're actually just diluting the product to have some gimmicky concept that no punter is going to be vaguely interested in or will remember when it's scrapped in a few months' time.
I think the other angle too, Ed, is it is being geared as a television product as well. It is in prime time evening slot on a Thursday night, so there is a huge opportunity in that space. But I think the other angle that needs to be factored in here somehow is how do you also get the audience to engage in whether it be different camera angles or different types of technology that perhaps could really make the customer a part of the experience rather than just seeing a team's environment sport.
Yeah, absolutely. That, as I said, I mean, I'm not again the deep technicalities of all. I mean, we probably be a few surprises along the way that we don't know about yet. It has to be said, but as I said, there's got to be. At the end of the day, you're trying to create a team culture where no one's really bothered about that culture. Let's just be blunt about it. No one really cares about these teams. I mean, I reckon 1 in 100 people will be, if that, will be bothered about the names of the teams and who they are, what colours they're wearing and everything. But, maybe you could bring in a fantasy league, a bit like fantasy football, for the public, throw out some cash and you can change your jockeys and your horses and, shift your teams around yourself. Or I don't know. As you say, there needs to be something. It's got a nice, unique slot, given this on a Thursday evening, on a major broadcaster. So it needs to be a selling point more to the public rather than just it is new and there's some new teams. Because I think that kind of triviality will wear quite thin quite fast. And I said the actual racing itself, I think will be good. We'll enjoy it. But we'll enjoy it just for it being the racing rather than everything, the whole thespian act around it, which is where all the investment and all the time and all the effort's gone into. So I'm fascinated, to be honest with you, and I'm not going to totally slay it yet because it might look at it, it might be refreshing, and as I said, for a time, maybe quite interesting. But my gut feeling is it's going to need to evolve quite quick and come up with some very quick, innovative ways of pulling public imagination into it, or as I said, it will just become another meeting and another load of races, and another load of handicaps, essentially run on the weather, and and that essentially is not what you want people to. You don't almost want people like myself and Stephen crabbing it before it started, and we may be totally wrong. But I don't know. It just feels like a nice idea which somehow hasn't quite been chiseled right. And I suppose like all these things, Shane, time will kind of be the bearer of good or bad news. And I would like it to do well. Is the bottom line.
Yeah, I think well said. We hope it is successful. Good luck to all involved. But the last point I'll say on it, I just think it's, again, another idea that is potentially just being recycled for the rusted-on fans of racing to try and bring in some sort of new flavour to it, rather than really, truly go out there and try and look at ways of activating those that may not have a necessary interest in the sport to get them in, following the sport and betting on it in a more productive way. Anyway, let's move on. Let's talk about last weekend. Terrific race, the King George VI and Queen Elizabeth Stakes at Ascot. And it only had a small field, Stephen, which is a huge bugbear of mine. I hate small fields, but on this occasion, I'm walking away satisfied because it was a phenomenal contest with the Derby winner, Adieu, coming out on top of Mishriff and also Love.
Yeah, I mean, this is more good news story, Shane, isn't it? I mean, at York, I think there was about 40,000 people. Ascot had several thousand people, not a capacity. But this was really good race. It was a fascinating card, and the race lived up to its billing. We saw the Derby winner come out, putting himself on the line and really battling on, which is not something that's happened for many years now. Good to see that form upheld. It was a proper race. The only thing from a financial point of view, personally, I backed Lone Eagle at 13-2. Obviously, these horses that halve in price, he ran absolutely appalling. I was quite amazed by Dettori sort of declining what would have been a soft lead when Broome missed the break. I was amazed at that, but Lone Eagle then petered out very tamely. I'd imagine he can't have been right. He was beaten a long way and very disappointing. I thought Love got a very ordinary ride from Ryan Moore, maybe because Broome missed the break. It rather messed up their plans. I think Broome was going to go off really hard and make it a test of stamina for Love. And Love got sort of caught in a poor position and finished with running left in her. I mean, I wouldn't write her off for an autumn campaign. She is top class. I thought she ran really, really well in the circumstances. And Mishriff, of course, loomed up on the outside and looked like he might win and didn't quite stay. I think he'll be dropped back to a mile 2 or a mile now. And he's probably a horse who's going to do a lot better. He reportedly wasn't fit for his first run of the season, amazingly. And the winner, a terrific ride, uncomplicated, tough, genuine. This was a terrific advert for racing. Racing needs top-class racing, Shane. It doesn't need gimmicks and invented things by people earning $100,000 a year for the privilege of dreaming them up. It needs more top-class racing for good prize money. That's where you get new people. Apparently, Ascot was chock-a-block full of young people going racing, enjoying the dressing up, the day out, having a drink, having a bet. That's how racing will do better, not through gimmicks.
Ed, when we talk about the winning performance of Vadea, he's run brilliant time. I mean, despite a small field, they've gone at a crackerjack pace virtually all the way through. I think the overall time was 2 minutes 26.54, which is about 2.5 seconds quicker than a standard time for a mile and a half at Ascot. And the best thing about his performance was he was still so strong on the line. He looks that sort of relentless galloping style of horse. And the future, over the next few months and possibly for another season with a bit of luck, could be oh so bright for him. He just might be the shining light of global racing.
Absolutely, yeah. Hold my hands up. I got him totally wrong there. I thought on the ground that was pretty lively. I just thought he might look a bit one-paced. I mean, even Charlie Appleby said before he ran in the Derby, he was delighted the rains arrived because he's definitely a horse who wants to get his toe in. But look, I mean, it was a fantastic performance, wasn't it? Really, just power clear in the closing stages, and yeah. Sounds like all roads lead to the Arc now with him, it has to be said, which is quite good for my Hurricane Lane kind of angle, because it actually sounds like they're doing a little bit of a U-turn now, and they now think they're going to go to the Ledger as a preference of him. But look, it was a terrific race, it has to be said. In regards to those in behind, yeah, Mishriff, it sounds like will be campaigned pretty much exclusively over 10 furlongs going further forward now. I think John Gosden said perhaps the Jude Monk might come into the equation, and Champion Stakes and a few others, they're going to weigh them up. Love, I don't quite know what to make of her on the back of that. I thought perhaps Ryan Moore could have made a little bit more use of her, because she's definitely got a lot of stamina. She was almost ridden for a little bit of a turn of foot, and then Mishriff closed the box, turning into the home straight, and nonetheless wouldn't have made a big difference. And I'm a little bit annoyed. I kind of went against Adayar in the sense of I keep harping on about the old weight for age, and obviously Love was trying to give away chunks of weight, was beating 2.5 lengths at the line. And I still think that there's a bit more to come from Love, it has to be said. I wouldn't be writing her off yet. I think she's a brilliant filly. I think Mishriff back at 10 furlongs, now fully fit, on some decent ground, take a lot of beating. And yeah, Adayar, we know he runs on quick. We know he goes on soft. Again, as we keep saying, we've been saying it for the last few shows, the 12 furlong kind of distance at the moment is chock full of some absolute superstars, isn't it, really? You've got Snowfall, Hurricane Lane, Adayar, you Love, you've got a whole host, you've got the Japanese horse, there's a couple in France as well, you've got Wonderful Tonight. The middle distance category is absolutely rocking it at the moment, isn't it? And so, yeah, Adayar, brilliant performance, but it's proven he can do it on a really quick surface now, and that is a massive tick in the box for him.
Certainly is. And the other thing that I'm taking away from that performance, and also some of the other races, was I went into this season perhaps doubting the strength or the opportunity for the 3-year-old division. Yet they've come out over the past month. A 3-year-old, St Mark's Basilica's won the Eclipse Stakes. We've seen a 3-year-old filly come out and win the Falmouth against the older mares. We've now seen a 3-year-old come out and win the King George, and also during this week the 3-year-olds running the first 3 placings in the Sussex Stakes. There is enormous depth in that division at the moment. We'll talk more about that a little bit later on the show. Guys, need to talk about what went on at Galway this week, because we spent a fair bit of time over the past couple of weeks talking about Galway being one of the marquee festivals for Irish racing. We had a situation which is, to be honest, baffling, stupid, and it's not good for the sport at all. Trainer Jessica Harrington saddled up in a 2-year-old filly's maiden earlier in the week, a horse that was the wrong horse. It turned out it was Aurora Princess, I should say, a winner of 2 of 9 starts, a 3-year-old filly, handicap rating of 79. She was saddled up in a 2-year-old maiden. She came out heavily backed, won ridiculously easy. And then after the race, it turns out Dr. Lynn Hillier, who was the chief veterinary officer in Ireland, discovered when doing a microchip test on the horse that it wasn't the filly that it should have been. How on earth do we get a situation, Stephen, in a multi-billion euro, multi-billion pound, multi-billion dollar industry globally, where we're having such basically stupid mistakes happen? Now, I know there are plenty of people out there saying, oh, it was just human error. The show goes on. We've got to move on. Don't worry about it too much. To me, it is just a complete and utter breakdown of integrity. And it makes many people very concerned about how often this type of error could actually be taking place.
Well, I mean, the only people who'll be relieved by this, Shane, are probably the BHA, because I think we've been doing this show for probably nearly a year now. So every week there's something goes wrong. It's either the wrong winning post, the photo doesn't work. We've got a new one. Now we've got the wrong horses running. And you're right. I mean, I do suspect this probably happens 25 times a year, doesn't it? It just so happens they don't actually win. I mean, if nobody's checking, I can't believe that they've walked around the paddock for 20 minutes before the race and nobody's realised. I mean, the people connected with the horse must know. I mean, it's quite a big difference in size and stature, aside of anything else. I mean, what is a horrendous thing here? I mean, this isn't going to get any sympathy from the winner. The winner, in inverted commas, Twinkle, is owned by one of the biggest punters in the game, and he was backed in the last 3 minutes from 11-4 into 5-4, smashing on. Now, you'd like to have been on the other. You think you've had a miracle and got it beat into second. It turns out they've run the run horse, and you end up paying out. And a lot of bookmakers would have paid out twice, first past the post on our Alizarine and on Twinkle as well. So that's my bookmaker hat, and I do feel sorry for the bookmakers at times. But no, I mean, I don't understand how this can happen at all. It's baffling. The only solution to it, and I saw Nick Luck saying this, and he's right, is that horses will have to be scanned as they enter the paddock before the race to confirm who they are. That's the only solution to it. I mean, you can't really believe it doesn't happen already.
The thing that I find fascinating about this, Ed, is that there seems to be a perception from a lot of participants in the game that, oh, well, it's just human error. We move on. Yes, there's an element of human error, and people do make mistakes, but you're supposed to have checks and balances in place. There has to be someone and it has to be an integrity official. So it's not necessarily attached to the stable because, as I said, if they're looking after a huge number of horses on the day, errors can occur. But where the hell has the checks and balances been to make sure that from the moment the horse has left the stall to the moment it's got to the barrier, no one's been able to pick up that this is the wrong horse? To me, it just makes absolutely no sense. And it just shows that a multi-billion pound or euro industry is being run like it's an amateur sport.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that like accountability check, isn't it? That's what you want to see. You want the infrastructure there to prevent the human error, don't you? You don't want the human to try and spot the error in infrastructure, which is the way it seems to be a little bit in the moment, doesn't it? And I mean, I may be totally wrong here. I believe in Ireland, the horses are scanned on arrival at the racecourse, but not once they leave the stables going to the parade ring. I believe that may be different in England now, where they are scanned leaving the pre-parade ring. Someone may be able to correct me on that. But essentially, in Ireland, horses are scanned on arrival, then that's it. So as you say, it could be a total mix-up. You could swap in Shergar for your 65 rated handicapper and no one know the difference officially in terms of what's accountable. And again, I can't imagine it's that expensive or takes that amount of time in the same way you use a contactless debit card in a shop just to did, yeah, right horse, did, right horse. I mean, it literally is taking half a second each time to do that. You know, it harks back to the nonsense we had with the photo at Sandown. These seem things that I cannot believe would cost hundreds of thousands of pounds to put right in an industry which is worth millions, and yet it seems to be like people break down with migraines about it when you tell them to fix it. Nothing gets done. Nothing ever gets done. Everyone talks about it, and then nothing gets done. I guarantee you we'll be having a chat in a year's time. There'll be another cock-up at Sandown, or someone have ridden the wrong course at Fakenham, or just the same things happen, and there doesn't just seems to be a big debate in it. As you say, Shane, it's like, oh, well, anyway, yeah, that happened. Never mind. Anyway, what's happening next week? You know, and it all just gets swept under the carpet. So, true. I mean, as I said, Nick Luck's point was bang on. It cannot be much of an infrastructural overhaul to have one guy with a scanner and a microchip and the technology put in place at each race course and just did, bang, and then all this would just go away. I mean, really. But anyway, if there is again a reason why that is particularly complicated, and then please someone enlighten us as to why that couldn't happen. But to me, if you could scan them on arrival to the racecourse, it would take an extra 15 seconds to scan them on arrival into the parade ring.
Yeah, but I think the other angle that they've got to really start thinking about, and this is something I've been talking about for years in coverage of the sport of racing, if you're not just horses running around a track anymore. It's a global industry. It's a global sport that is up against, as an entertainment option for people and a betting option for people, it's up against the NBA, it's up against the NFL, it's up against football codes and Premier Leagues, and the list goes on. So you can't just keep having these basic rookie errors occurring at marquee activity, because you don't see that happening in other sports. And at some stage, the game has got to really grow up and say, we're legitimate players in this space, or else in 20, 30, 40 years, the sport will just fade off into further insignificance, and the trainers will be racing their horses for ribbons rather than prize money, because the interest levels will just drop away. You've got to start taking the sport seriously, and these things should not be happening. Anyway, let's focus more on some of the positive aspects of racing, and we certainly have seen some really good performances on the track this week. Stephen, we'll start with a couple of the feature events. To Galway, of course, we had the Galway Plate. Good to see Willie Mullins, after a slow start to the week, actually strike with Royal Rendezvous scoring a dashing win, basically from the front all of the way. And on the flat at Goodwood, in the Goodwood Cup, Trushan was far too good for Holly Doyle with the late scratching of the four-time winner Stradivarius, and that brilliant performance by the 3-year-olds, in particular the filly Alcohol Free, in winning the Sussex Stakes. It's just been an amazing couple of days of racing.
Yeah, Galway Royal Rendezvous. Well, that was an incredible round of jumping, wasn't it? Absolutely winged every fence and flew round Galway. Very impressive. My highlight at Glorious Goodwood, Shane, has been the performance of Alcohol Free yesterday. I thought, if you watch back the first couple of 100 yards of that race, which doesn't seem to have got talked about that much, Murphy was in a very poor position, trapped very wide, and Alcohol Free threatened to pull her chance away altogether. She was very free for the first furlong, but it was brilliant jockeyship after that point to get her in and settled. And I thought she made up a lot of ground and did very well to sustain her run. Maybe Poetic Flair wants fast ground. I think that was something we felt with the race, and wasn't quite 100% on his A game. But I really was impressed with the way Alcohol Free quickened up. I think she'll be even better, maybe dropping back in trip rather than going up in trip, which seems to be the plan. But she's got loads more scope to keep on improving. And as you touched on the first day at Goodwood, Holly Doyle rode a treble. She is absolutely, we've mentioned this many times before, she's definitely one of the top 5 in the weighing room, regardless of gender. That's not a factor at all. She's an extremely talented jockey and deserves to get a lot more chances than she actually even gets now. But she was in the perfect place at the right time on Trushan. Just to touch on one point you made, Shane, I was bitterly disappointed that Stradivarius didn't run. He's 7 years old. He's won on soft ground before. I thought that was a very, very poor decision. I think John Gosden's getting a bit Ed'll like this one, Shane. He's getting a bit like Henrietta Knight in his old age, mollycoddling them in cotton wool rather than just running.
Do you agree with that, Ed? Getting a little bit protective of his champions, is he?
Oh, absolutely. I love it. Yeah, put him away now for 7 months, bring him back for no, absolutely. Well, I mean, I don't know. I get the feeling Stradivarius is coming to the end. They probably got one last hurrah in him. Yeah. And his view was, if we totally bottom him in there and he drops out the back of the television, that might be him cooked for his career, essentially. So I see they've mentioned Doncaster, mentioned York. So he's basically, John Gosden said, we're going to go back to drawing board and have a proper think about what we do with him now. I think he's got 1 or 2 runs left, I think, Stradivarius. But to be fair, even on that ground, I think, Trushan, we talked about, didn't we? Trushan was a non-runner at Royal Ascot because the ground went really quick. Trushan in those conditions will take some stopping. Be interested what they do with Trushan as well, whether they look at the Cadran or whether they look at the staying race here or whatever. So it was interesting. I mean, my kind of horse I just wanted to pick up from Shane. We talked about Alcohol Free winning a good style was Snow Lantern, who finished 3rd. I mean, there's two elements to this. James Spencer come in for a lot of criticism on the ride, saying that he give her too much to do. I've got a little bit of sympathy with him in the fact that I just don't think she's that quick, in all honesty. And Goodwood's a track where you want to almost be on the speed and have a bit of dash about you, whereas Snow Lantern, she's an individual that needs to get rolling. We said on last week's show, we talked about it. Shane, you asked me. I said I would have run her in the Nassau. I think she needs 10 furlongs. I mean, she needed every yard to win the Falmouth. At Royal Ascot, she came from 8th to 2nd up the running. She's got going again far too late here. I'd just love to see them roll the dice over 10 furlongs with her. I think that could bring out another £5 or £6 improvement in truth, but it sounds like they're going to stick to a mile again with her going further forward. But just an interesting one. If they did go up to 10 furlongs, I think she, especially getting her fillies allowance, could ruffle up some of the colts in a really big race. But yeah, one to just keep in your notebook to see where they go with her Snow Lantern.
Yeah, good point. And I tend to agree with you. I think if she ran in the Nassau, she would have been an odds-on favourite and she probably would have hacked up. But alas, she didn't. She ran well for third. Alcohol-free, getting over the top of Poetic Flare. I think one last point on this, Stephen, was every time Alcohol-free has basically stepped out, and there was a fair bit of chatter on social media about this, she's been heavily punted. There's been a lot of money for her in a series of Group 1 races. So the confidence about her and her overall ability is clearly well known, and clearly something that some of the big bettors are really quite keen to support. She's on her day. She's breathtaking.
Definitely. She's still doing a lot wrong, Shane. When she got beaten the Falmouth, I think they got that wrong, that they tried to lead and they got driven mad a bit from halfway, and she was still not settled, about 2 out, and she just weakened in the last sort of 50 yards. Well, not weakened, but just got picked up. That was a brilliant race. Touching on Snow Lantern briefly, this was the worst jockey switch in history of racing, wasn't it? Sean Levy is a really good jockey, replaced by Spencer. I can guarantee you that Jamie Spencer won't be riding for Richard Hannon Jr. again after that. I mean, he was in front of Alcohol-free, turning for home in a really good position. And for some reason, he gave up about 3 or 4 lengths, shuffled back to rear and ran on strongly. I thought Snow Lantern ran an absolute blinder, but you won't be seeing Jamie Spencer rider again.
I want to talk about the condition of the track, Ed, and I'll start with you on this, but Stephen referenced it a little bit earlier. Leading into Goodwood, they did put a fair amount of water on the track, and then, of course, you had in the UK quite significant downpours of rain in the build-up, and we saw the meeting start in very heavy going, which certainly had a significant impact on the performances of quite a few horses on day one. Do you think they're overdoing this whole policy of watering tracks going into major meetings, or are you comfortable with what the policy is at this stage?
Yeah, very interesting question, that, Shane. I mean, there is one side of the argument to say, regardless of the watering, if it had the amount of rain it had, it would still been heavy anyway. So have they particularly lost much in that sense? But it's always a hard one because you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, as a clerk of the course. I mean, I don't know enough specifically about the subject, to be honest with you, but what I'd be interested in is, like, can it not just be left to the last minute to water? I mean, you see what I'm saying? Is there kind of a long... That a lot of the courses say, well, we can't water too late. We want to gradually introduce a kind of build up the moisture within the ground. I mean, is there a way we can wait and see a lot more and then put the water on at the last minute? Is there a way they could do that without making false ground? I don't know. To be honest with you, by and large, I have a lot of sympathy for clerks of the course because sometimes, crikey, I live around the corner from Cheltenham. I remember there was a weather forecast in the Met Office. It forecasted 4 millimetres for the Cheltenham October meeting. The ground's been left alone, whatever. They had 24, and that was the weather forecast wrong at 3 days' notice. So I'm thinking a lot of occasions, you as I said, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, and you are literally in the lap of the gods a lot of times. But whether, as you say, Shane, as an overall kind of mindset and model, this right, when we start watering 6 days in advance, I'm like, hang on a minute. Is there a harm if it comes up really quick? Is it more of a detriment to the sport if it comes up good to firm as opposed to heavy? I don't know really. I'm a bit ambivalent, a bit torn on the issue. To be honest with you, my gut feeling is just leave it and let it be how it is. But then you'll have traders complain the other way that the ground's like Bath on a Thursday evening. So yeah, a tricky one to get right, I'd say.
And Stephen, of course, in National Hunt, you do need tracks with give. The horses are jumping quite big fences, and of course, we can have situations where things don't go right. There can be horses falling and jockeys being spilled. So you do want there to be significant cushion in the track. But when it comes to flat racing, it's a vastly different scenario, I think, and it's almost like certain jurisdictions around the world have different approaches to things. I know in Asia, particularly in Japan and in Hong Kong, they like their tracks to be firmer compared to other jurisdictions around the world, principally Australia, and also now what we're seeing in the UK. So you can't even get a sort of a consistent approach globally as to what's the best outcome.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, I'm quite much more reactionary than Ed, I think. I think that this was another cock-up. I mean, obviously, Seamus, who is the former clerk of the course at Goodwood, used to love to start on good to soft and call it good to firm. So there's a history of distrust, particularly at Goodwood, among punters down the years. Now, there's a new clerk now, but I think he's still got the handbook that Seamus left behind. I mean, the weather forecast for this week has always been unsettled and rain. Now, we don't know how much is going to arrive, when it's going to arrive, and obviously we can see today, which is Thursday, that the track can dry out very quickly. It's good to soft today, and it was heavy on Tuesday. So that is a mitigating circumstance. But I do think the fact that they were watering on Thursday when the meeting's due to start 4 or 5 days later, that is completely mad. I mean, apparently the last 12 years for Glorious Goodwood, it's been good to firm once and softer than that on the other 11 occasions. Well, that's not acceptable. I mean, if you're a punter, this is a midsummer meeting for flat racing. It's not a 3-mile chase at Cheltenham in October. And there's good fast ground. Now, as Ed said, it poured with rain. It would have been on the softer side anyway, but you do get the suspicion that you're already starting on good or good to soft ground with the watering. And when it rains on top, you get a million. I mean, the first day at Goodwood, this is a betting industry. There were 29 non-runners, Shane. I mean, that is absolute. It completely decimated any turnover on the first day of one of the big festivals of the whole flat season. So it is a disgrace. There needs to be guidelines. There are supposed to be guidelines to produce good to firm ground. That's supposed to be the aim. But it does seem that there's a sort of terrified nature that it's going to be Bath on firm ground if they don't put tons of water on it for the weeks before. And it just time and time again, these meetings are getting ruined from a punting point of view because of the uncertainty about what you're going to get on the first day.
All right, guys, we'll leave it there. It's now time to have a look at some of the upcoming races. Going to focus on 3 good betting races coming up this weekend, and we'll start with one of the biggest betting races we have of the year, and that is the Unibet Stewards Cup over 6 furlongs at Glorious Goodwood on day 5. And we've just got the lazy 28 runners to face the starter. We start with Chill, who's currently at 16-1 with Coral, thanks to irishracing.com with the fields here. Chill, Sylvester D'Souza taking the ride. Summergard, who's got a great record in these type of races, at 14-1. Dan Zeno's at a big price. Punch Bowl Flyer at 16s. Mr. Lupton at 22s. We move on down to Etchlet Bar. Try that again. Lealab. David Egan takes the ride there at 12-1. Lampang's at a big price, as is Motogali at 20s. Comanche Falls currently at 11-1. Connor Beasley taking the ride there. Miras is at 16-1 for the champion jockey Ryan Moore. Hey Jonesy, Megan Nichols in the saddle. Ostillo at a big price at 66s. Hurricane Ivor. Tom Marquand taking the ride currently at around 10-1. Gulliver's at 22s. Fresh, one of the market leaders, currently at 7-1, Kieran Schumacher in the saddle. Jamie Spencer riding Chief of Chiefs at 12-1. Beals are at 16-1. Desert Safari, Joe Fanning in the saddle at 28-1. Zarzini is at 16-1. Count Otto is at a big price. Great Ambassadors at 20-1 for William Buick. Total Commitment, another at a big price with the apprentice riding. Zargan currently at an outsider price of 50s. Tinto's at 40-1 for the informed Marco Gianni. Atalanta's Boys at 16-1 with the claim. Major Jumbo at 22s. Bar Bills at 40-1. And number 28 there, Just Another Bottle at 40-1. It's always one of the hardest races to work out each and every year, Stephen. Are you confident?
Not confident, Shane. 28 runners. We always say this every week. If you're going to have a bet, play each way, but find a bookmaker offering at least 6 places. You'll probably find you might get down to 8 with a bit of luck if you look around. It tilts things in your favour as a punter rather than 4 places, which is impossible to make it pay over time. So 28 runners. I thought the money for Fresh is interesting. Ran an absolute blinder in the Wokium. Not had that many chances in these type of races. Sure to go well. That's been back from 12 into 7. But the one I liked is Chill. Andrew Balding, absolutely flying at the moment. Very progressive handicapper. She's doing really well. She ran a lot of bear result behind Starman in group company last time out. I thought that was a good run after a slow break, soon in a poor position, and didn't really make any impression, but wasn't disgraced. Back into handicaps. My one negative about Chill, I am a bit worried if it gets really soft. I think she'll be okay on good to soft, but if the rain does arrive, if it got really testing, that would be an unknown, and she's got plenty of speed, so I would be slightly concerned, but she's my selection in a wide open handicap.
All right, chill there from Stephen. Ed, have you got any firm opinions when it comes to the Stewards Cup this year?
Well, I got a couple of the shortlist. I thought last year's winner, Summergard, is actually quite interesting now. It's dropped to only £1 higher than the last successful. Again, the weather's going to be a key factor here because I think Summergard will like it pretty quick. So I've got last year's winner penciled in if the rains do miss. If the ground goes to an absolute bog, There's a horse here, David Minutier, is really interesting, called Atlanta's Boy, who has a very smart form over course of distance, including a course of distance win on heavy. Flopped in this race last year, was racing the ambulance as they came into the closing stages, but that was on absolutely rattling ground by the time they went to post. I think this horse on soft, for marker 95, I see Thomas Greatrex has been booked the claim 3 as well, would be really interesting. So my enthusiasm is tempered, given it's an absolute lottery at the moment, what actual ground they will go to post on. But if it does turn into an absolute bog, I will be backing Atlanta's Boy.
Good point you raised there. And of course, we really need to keep an eye on what the weather is doing, but also what type of patterns we have when it comes to the straight races on Friday, and also with the early stages of Saturday. Might actually be a significant draw bias, whether you want to be on the stand side, far side, or even down the middle. Let's go to one of the other feature races on the card. It's the Group 2 Qatar Lillie Langtry Stakes for the fillies and mares over 1 mile 6 furlongs, 2,800 metres if you go in that direction. And Wonderful Tonight is a short price favourite with the form from IrishRacing.com. Bet 365 markets here. David Manuzia, William Buick, she's currently 5-4 on. Alba Flora, 11-2, Ross Orion taking the ride. Believe in Love at 10-1. A couple of letters at 16-1. Golden Pass at 14-1. Macawie's at 20s. Tracia at 16-1 for Joseph O'Brien. Troublecraft at 14-1. Divinely, the filly for Aidan O'Brien. Ryan Moore taking the ride currently at 12-1. Stephen, I know that you're a big fan of Wonderful Tonight. I think she was going to be a serious contender if she lined up in the King George last weekend. David Manoussier has elected to go to this race in preference. He'll probably get the ideal softer conditions for her too. Mm-hmm. To my eye, she just might be one of the bets of the week.
I think she's a nap, Shane, now. They've taken out Alpinisto. I was very keen on. I thought might be the each-way alternative. But Wonderful Tonight is trained by a genius, Manoussier. We seem to talk about him every week. He places his horses so well, whether in handicaps or at group level. And this progressive filly, she's run over this trip once before at Longchamp on soft ground last season. She quickened up well and won readily. I thought she was brilliantly impressive in the Hardwick at Royal Ascot. If you watch the run back, she was free enough and wide enough throughout, but she sprinted clear when asked. It was an amazing performance given that she didn't settle. I think if you get anything around even money, it's maximum bet material. Hopefully you might. There's one or two lurkers in there. It's going to be heavy ground. I think as long as she settles, she'll come through smoothly and win. I think she's very nearly top class and will be very hard to beat.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I'm just having a look at the current markets. She's sort of hovering around the 6-5 on, a 5-4 on. I know that there was a little bit of 11-10 earlier today. Ed, are you in the Wonderful Tonight camp, or do you think there can be something in the field to knock off the favourite?
Absolutely, with the favourite here. And to be honest with you, if the rains do arrive and this ground turns heavy, should be more of a 4-7 shot on the day, I think it has to be said. Yeah, I mean, David Manoussier, as Stephen says, he's the best French import since Michel Roux, isn't he, really, at the moment? I mean, he's absolutely, he's been operating at around a 30% strike rate for the whole of July. I mean, the yard of absolutely flying at the moment. And she's, I hope she wins this and they don't overface her and they start thinking about the arc with her because, look, she looks brilliant, officially rated 117. She's on the fringe of being right up into that top bracket now, isn't she? She seems to be improving. She's won 4 of her last 5. Lovely, devastating performance last time out. Ground should be in a favour here. And I suppose 1 mile 6, you just wouldn't want her to get a little bit lit up around a course like Goodwood, which has got its quirks. That would just pose a little bit of question mark about stamina, but I think she's just going to have too much class for this field in conditions which should come nicely in her favour, I think it has to be said.
You mentioned that she is being considered going towards the Arc, where I think, historically, we get into October in Paris. At Longchamp, the track is usually with a fair amount of give in it. I mean, you'd have to have her as a legitimate top 4, top 5 contender, and then it's just a matter of finding the price that suits.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, we touched upon it at the start of the show, didn't we? The 12 furlong kind of brigade. There's so many good horses at the moment that are stacking up for that category, and she's definitely one of them. She's still got to prove she's up into that 120 echelon, but of course she'll get her fillies allowance in the Arc as well, won't she? So I think she's a cracking individual. I hope she gets the job done here, minimum of fuss, and then you could look to the really big targets as we head into the autumn.
All right, let's have a look at another race on Saturday on the flat. And at Newmarket, we've got the running of the Chalice Stakes, a fillies and mares listed race over 1.5 miles. And we've currently got 10 horses that have accepted. Dabia is at a big price of 33 to 1. Joseph O'Brien. Salsada's at 20s. Sherbet Lemon at 10s. Chiasma also at 10 to 1. Invite, Andrew Balding, David Probert, 5 to 1. Portfolio, the Deep Impact filly owned by Her Majesty the Queen at 7 to 1. Quinel d'Or at 10 to 1. Saver Forest, market leader at the moment, 3 to 1. Saida at 7 to 2. And Yes at 4 to 1. So we've sort of got 3 or 4 fillies there, Stephen, at sort of vying for favouritism there. But it certainly does look to be quite an interesting race this for the fillies and mares.
Yeah, this is a very interesting race. And the first thing to say, at the moment it's Thursday, the ground at Newmarket's good to firm. But looking at the weather forecast, it says 100% chance of rain all day Friday and 90% on Saturday. So I'm throwing that out the window. I think the ground will ease, if that's right, which is a dangerous thing to assume. But if it becomes good to soft or soft, Yes of Rafe Beckett is a really good bet around 4 or 5 to 1. Beckett has had 11 winners in the last 14 days. He's absolutely flying. 20% strike rate. Everything he runs is winning. He had a double at Goodwood the other day. And this one was impressive at Lingfield last time out on softish ground and also workmanlike on her debut. She steps up in class here, but all of the others, I think, need fast ground and they've been declared on it. Whereas Yes, I think he's taken a chance that it's going to ease. If you back Yes now each way at 5 to 1, this could be a race that cuts up. I can see horses being taken out. You might end up with 5 or 6 runners. You'll be on 3 places. I think she's a really good each way bet now and pray the weather forecast is right.
Good point. She was a little slow to begin last start, but she was so impressive when winning. I think she's this daughter of Camelot certainly got a hell of a lot of scope about her. Ed, are you in the Yes camp or do you like something else in the Chalice?
Yes, I'm with yes. Actually, yeah. Funny enough, I based on the ground. I mean, the two I shortlisted with the 2 at the bottom there. There was yes on the basis of the ground does go to pop, and Saida for Charlie Appleby and James Doyle. I thought she quickened up nicely on much faster surface over course and distance last time. It looks to be progressing, but she's a Dubawi filly. Looks to have a few more natural gears. Because I think yes, she's got a bit of a knee action and almost wants more of a galloping test. And as I said, this could just come down to a battle of wills in very soft ground. And if that's the case, then she's the one that fits the bill. So again, recorded a bit too far in advance to have strong convictions about, but I've kind of gone the soft ground route, the fast ground route, and they'd be the 2 at the bottom of your card there. Yes, if it turns into a bog, and Saida if the rains blow 5 miles east of the track and it maintains its quick ground. And I do think, Charlie Appleby is going to do very little wrong this season, can he? And she's on a hat trick, Saida, and she looks exciting.
All right, there's a couple of the flat races, and of course there's also great racing coming up, continuing at Galway. Make sure you head to irishracing.com to get all the fields, forms and betting information there. It's now time for the tips of the week. And Stephen, we'll start with you as we reflect on last week. You're still well ahead overall units ahead of the game at 61.5 units up. But we struck out last week. System missing out in the Princess Margaret. Fantastic Fox in the Porsche Handicap, and also Lone Eagle disappointing in the King George. But let's have a look at what you like for this weekend.
Yep. Well, the horses that I've touched on already, Shane. Yes, I think is a really good each way bet, actually. And I would back her now if you're going to have a bet and hope that you get the weather forecast right. As I say, the places are probably the value. She's a thorough stayer, relentless galloper. Rain looks inevitable. That will hamper the chances of all of her market rivals. So I think now she'd be one of the strongest bets for the weekend. Wonderful tonight. We've touched on already. I think if you get even money, it's probably, if you look on the exchanges, I think you might find you do get even money about Wonderful tonight. She's another one. You want the more rain that falls, the better. Just like to see her settle in the first furlong or two. I think she'll be extremely hard to beat. And in the Stewards Cup, the biggest price one, Chilchilu, I think is 14 or 16 to 1. Conversely, she probably doesn't want it getting too testing. She's certainly not proven on deep ground, but I think she's overpriced. I think she's better than a handicapper, and she will love the fast pace assured in that 28-runner race.
All right, good luck to you. Ed, let's have a look at your performance last week. Of course, you were quite keen on Love in the King George, and she ran well but was beaten. And Bill Pato, of course, was pulled out of the race at Newmarket. So you're still ahead of the curve, 5.5 units up, as we have a look at who you like for this weekend. Talk us through it.
Yeah, well, we're going with Bill Pater again. It was absolutely smashed in the betting last time, backed into favourite, and then pulled out 12 minutes before the off because the ground was too quick. Well, I don't think there'll be any issues of rattling quick ground at Goodwood for this assignment. And yeah, same reasons as last week. Unexposed, up in trip. Stephen's favourite jockey in the world, Jamie Spencer's back on board, who incidentally is the only jockey to have won on Bill Pato so far. So I think it will be a little bit of a hostage to fortune at a track like Goodwood, but unexposed, lots of middle distance pedigree. This one's stamina, from the family of Manjuros, at least 12 furlongs plus shouldn't be an issue. You would have thought ground on the slower side would be fine. I think there'll be a lot more to come. And then that man again, Devon Minutier, have said the yard are absolutely flying, and Louis Saint-Georges has some cracking form at Goodwood. I mean, in terms of like horses for courses, it's got its real idiosyncrasies, hasn't it, Goodwood? I do like horses who've got form there. He's got 2 wins on the CV at Goodwood, plenty of course of distance form. Soft ground will be no problem if the rain's too open. They've changed the tactics of this individual recently as well, including with Sean Levy, who will be riding again in this assignment. They've gone to this kind of front-running, swashbuckling style with gradually winding up for the front and kicking, and it's really worked, especially on the last 2 occasions. Comes in here on a hat trick. Yes, he's going up in the weights, but as I said, the yard, that the whole string just seems to be a real fine fettle at the moment. And I think track, trip, ground, yard, everything's right for Louis Saint-Georges, and I expect a bold bid from the front once again.
All right, you make a good case for both of them. Now it's time to reflect on my selections for last week. Nazanin was very disappointing, or Nazanin, I should say, in the Princess Margaret Stakes. But I'll tell you what, Sassy Rascal ran very, very well in that race. Was slow to begin, and I think if Sassy Rascal learns to begin well, will win a decent race. But the other selection that I had last week was Marsabit, who was in front every step of the way down the straight at Royal Ascot and nailed right on the line when finishing runner-up, but we did go each way, and Armory was just outridden. It was a very strange race, the Skybet York Stakes last weekend. But let's have a look at who I like this weekend, and I'm all about Wonderful Tonight. I'm going 100% all in on Wonderful Tonight. 10 units to win on this very, very good mare in the Lillie Langtry Stakes. Best price at the moment, 11 to 10 on with Coral. I think she'll win. I think she'll win easily, and I think she'll continue her march towards the Arc in Paris come October. It's our tips of the week. All right, guys, just put you on the spot. I haven't mentioned anything about the Olympics. Of course, Australia is doing better than the English on the medal tally. I'm based in Denmark now, and we're certainly well ahead of my good friends, the Danes, but exciting times within the sporting world, Stephen, but when we focus on racing, there's a lot to look forward to, and in particular this weekend, some really, really good contests set to come our way.
Yeah, cracking race. So we've got Batash, of course, on Friday at Glorious Goodwood as well, a top-class sprinter. I really am looking forward to Wonderful Tonight. I love David Manuzzi. I think he's a modest, up-and-coming trainer. I suspect if he got some of the ammunition that the bigger stables get, you might see him winning Group 1s all over the shop. So hopefully Wonderful Tonight will be a really impressive winner and then go to the Arc, where, I mean, she could be the one to side with there. If it really rides soft there, that won't suit a lot of the front of the market there either. So, yeah, cracking racing, as you say.
Good to work with you. Good luck this weekend. Ed, what are you looking forward to the most?
Yeah, very similar, really. I mean, Batash is a horse we haven't really talked about in this show. We haven't had time, but of course, he's going to try and win the race for the 5th time, isn't he? At Goodwood, quite remarkable, really. He had his surgery over the winter period. Ran pretty well for a long way, it has to be said, on his comeback at Ascot. By all accounts, is stripped a lot fitter and come on for that. And be great to see that. We'd like to see the same horses coming back and winning these contests, don't we? It's great for the kind of the way you sell the sport, and be great to see Batash win. I'd love to see, no financial involvement, but love to see Wonderful Tonight win, because I do think she's a wonderful filly. And yeah, looking forward to Goodwood, and should be some good action this weekend.
Good working with you, and good luck this weekend. There we have it, Stephen Harris and Ed Quigley joining me here on Jump To It. Make sure you head to irishracing.com, get all of the form, fields, betting information and tips. Vincent and the team do a fantastic job there. And of course, make sure you keep heading to bettingexpert.com. You get Stephen Harris's daily tips, his best bet and his value bet. We've talked about it repeatedly on this show. He's been in great form throughout the season, and he certainly looks set to strike again with Glorious Goodwood coming to an end. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's edition of Jump To It. I'll be off for the next couple of weeks. Joe Ryan will be hosting the show. We'll see you again very soon.